Item for approval, action item 1A is the approval of the minutes of March 11, 2024. I move the approval of action item 1A. May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the item? All right, we'll now move to a vote. All those in favor?
I abstain.
Okay. Any opposed or abstentions? Oh, one abstention, okay. Any opposed? All right, it's approval with one abstention. With no other action items on the agenda, we'll now move on to information items. At the March meeting, Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Renee Sarmiento, supported by Colin Shellman, Senior University Dean for Applied Research, Evaluation, and Data Analytics, that's a great title, provided updated enrollment data, including application conversions and the success of CUNY Reconnect 2.0. The impacts of FAFSA delays and our action plans to address them were also discussed. At today's meeting, Vice Chancellor Sarmiento will be supported by Assistant Dean for Policy Research, Sarah Trulick. Her report, it will include the enrollment report, followed by focused presentation on financial aid. This includes the impact of the delays associated with FAFSA, how CUNY is addressing the issue, changes to TAP, and future financial aid initiatives. In addition, Associate Provost Lauren Anderson will present on an initial proposed campus model for career success. Vice Chancellor Sarmiento, and by the way, again, to our provost, let me thank you. This has been a great team. I've loved the presentations that have been made. I would strongly suggest that back either in September or October, that a presentation by that group come to the full board. I think it is important and it should be done in public.
You mean transfer?
Yes.
Happy to do it.
I think that is great, but just in general, the work that's been done and focused on enrollment has been
Would
excellent.
love to do that.
So
Thank
I would
you.
really, I'm going to make sure that that occurs.
Great.
Again, thank you.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to bring the information to you.
It's a pleasure.
We have a phenomenal team, so I'll turn it right over to Renee.
Okay, so I think that's the agenda. I think it's pretty self-explanatory what we're going to go through. I'm going to go over enrollment numbers, and this was taken on May 8th. I could just tell you right now that all of these numbers have gone down. And later on, I'm going to go over the reason why, which is no big surprise, which is the FAFSA delays. And I'll be able to quantify that with our, with the number of students who have actually applied for the FAFSA versus not. It is a national topic of education right now within higher ed. I can't pick up a paper in any higher ed and not see the impacts of the FAFSA delays. That said, we are still ahead of last year when it comes to the fall enrollment. So unique applications, while this is old, right, the new data says that new students were up by 6%, transfers were up by 7%, we're pretty stable with graduate applications. So what that means from last year to this year, we still have that momentum that we started in November, right? And that's the unique applications, meaning they could apply to as many as 7 institutions. In the fall, you could see that's at 6.3%. Right now we are at 3.5, ahead of last year in terms of total enrollment. So we are down in freshmen, while it says 16% there, we're down 3.6. In transfer, it says we're up by 30%, we are now up by 3%, right? So it is, the gain that you see here is because all of the colleges started to register early, they applied early, all in order to be able to get ahead of the momentum, right? And so now what you're seeing is everything catching up, but yet we're still ahead. The sectors, that gives you an idea of it across the board with community colleges, comprehensive, and seniors. Those have all gone down, but they're not in the negative. which is important to note. This is just to be able to say that Reconnect, while we're still looking at enrollment, we have met our goal for CUNY Reconnect. And that number will probably reach over 17,000 because we are still looking at summer enrollment.
By the way, the money that allowed us to do that, I guess, had been provided by the city council and directly from the speaker. Is that in for this coming budget?
I thought that it was in there, but it hasn't been, we haven't heard back yet. Did you hear anything?
I mean, we requested it of the city or the council to restore it.
Right.
But it was only I think it was only 1 million as opposed to 5 million? Is that right? No? It was not the full amount, I can tell you that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on that issue, since you now actually have proof of concept, is this something that can be shopped to a foundation since as a source of funding for this other than city council money? I mean, you've now demonstrated sort of the success of this. It seems like something that a private foundation might be willing to pick up for several years.
I think we'll absolutely pursue whatever we need to continue. I mean, many of these strategies are part of the enrollment strategy as well. So
No, I understand.
Yeah.
But this is sort of something that you could highlight as like, it was a demonstration project funded by the
Yeah.
city council. It's like
If we cannot get
it's a-
funding from city council, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that when we looked at all of these individuals who have come through our doors, 10% have graduated and 90% of them were former CUNY students, 90%. So there is definitely a proof of concept.
So the use of the word reconnect is perfect.
Correct. I really want to focus on this topic in terms of the FAFSA challenges, and I'm just going to give a really high-level view of some of the challenges. The background on this is that one of the changes is that the IRS information that would normally just automatically populate on the FAFSA did not do that. It is also not connected to the TAP application, because when you do the federal one, the state one automatically connects. So that's a challenge and a change. More background is that the student had to claim an ID even before applying, and it sometimes took days to do. There is also a push for the parents to receive the information, and most students felt like if they completed the application, well, I did it. And so a lot of the applications were incomplete because the parents didn't complete them. And even after the FAFSA was published, many parents that didn't have social security numbers could not apply. So we've got a subset of students who couldn't even apply even with the challenges they had already. The good news that the DOE is saying is that now they can list up to 20 colleges, right? That they had it available in many languages, that there was a new Pell calculation, and there were 20 fewer questions than before. So if we're able to log on, if you're able to stay on, if you're able to get your ID, if you're able to push all the information out to your parents, things were fine. Traditionally, it is published, the application is published in October for people to apply. It didn't start till January, and even then there were delays. That started the whole snowball effect. So as you recall, we had this great push for applications. The momentum was moving, and along those times when students apply, they also apply for financial aid, and that just did not happen. And then even when it did happen after they came from break, the students that did try to apply were often knocked off because of technological glitches. And this talked about the number of errors. At one point, they had to stop processing because they realized that there was an error, recalculated. to the tune of that if they didn't do that, thousands of students wouldn't be eligible for aid. So there were not only technical delays, but in the way that it was, the methodology was also flawed. I talked about that in terms of the challenges. The changes even for financial aid, if they somehow did something wrong on their application, they're not able to make corrections until now the end of June, not late April. So end of June. If you make a mistake on the financial aid and we're trying to correct it for you, we can't do it till the end of June. The student has to do it. And in many cases, it's a back and forth of, do you remember your ID? Let's look at your information. Where normally the financial aid offices would be able to walk them through it. Now it's, the students are on their own. So what did we do about it? Very early on, that net price calculator got, I believe, 10,000 hits in the first 2 weeks, because that calculator showed their families how much they'd be eligible for an aid. And I think that that was a game changer. We shifted our commitment fee to June. That also contributes to the lack of enrollment, because people are trying to commit in June, and we move that date forward. So we're even behind when it comes to our commitment day. We also launched the CUNY FAST program that hired 24 coaches to go into the DOE, pulled them out of class, and they were applying. The DOE was very sympathetic to the plight and said, what can you do? We don't have enough staff. So we've been in libraries, we've been in the DOE, we've been at CUNY campuses, and we purposely postponed the award letter till June 1 because we couldn't get award letters out till May 8th. So we're all caught up now, which is a good thing. All the students who applied have their award letters, and if you've seen social media, it talks about the one-on-one supports that we're providing to students. This work can't be done in a large setting. It has to be one-on-one. And many times parents don't want to talk about their income even with their children present. So it's a very one-to-one, labor-intensive work in terms of getting them to complete. Now, what does this say for CUNY students? New students, we are 25% below where we were. It's 25% less new students have not completed their FAFSA. For continuing students, it's even more. 35% have just finishing finals, they're going to go on break, and they have not completed their FAFSA. That's troubling. And then the other 30% filed the FAFSA, put a college campus, a CUNY campus, and did not apply. That number is pretty staggering too. So we've got disconnects in all three areas. The campuses have launched pretty extensive campaigns. This talks about NYCPS. This talks about the work study, going to the library, and then the work that we also needed to provide supports to the financial aid offices, because June, July, and August will be big months for them in trying to get everyone through who has not yet applied. So there are FAFSA events in every borough in our campuses. I attended the LaGuardia one. They're matching them up with all of their orientation events. Hundreds have been coming out for this, and at every opportunity they are applying for financial aid. So over 200 staff have been trained on the FAFSA, the DREAM, and the TAC. We're over at over 40 high schools up until they are at the end of school, trying to get as many students to apply. The good thing is when we look at state to state, New York has done better than most states in completing the FAFSA. So if there's a silver lining in any of that.
So no one's going to college in September. He's telling me around the country.
And if you're, I'm on social media FAFSA sites, parents are really worried, they're frustrated, they're giving up, right? It's just a combination of, maybe we should just wait. So it is a big concern. And I think that the colleges are matching all of their orientation events, every venue they can to be able to get that FAFSA number up. Just in April alone, we served 1,000 students. There are 185 events. I mean, this is a full court press. My team is going out to visit the boroughs because all the colleges are sponsoring events, and many of them are also virtual because they can't, for whatever reason, they can't get to the campus. We also want to offer as many virtual events as possible.
If I can just give a quick shout out to Renee's team. They have been out ahead of this and ahead of SUNY at every step of the way. And it's not only in terms of marshaling the support, but going to your point, Trustee, we've gotten significant private philanthropic dollars to help support these efforts. So just really want to, those numbers don't look good. Where we would be without that full court press is catastrophic. So just thank you to your team, Renee.
Yeah, I think that I share my concern. The campuses are all concerned, and if there's nothing like a good crisis to get everybody on the same page. Everyone is looking at this with through executive leadership all the way to the front lines. So another good silver lining, though, is we did manage to, and CUNY has been advocating for this for quite some time, to change TAP so that more students would be eligible for. So students that were at 80,000 now could qualify for TAP. Now it's up to 125, right? That they've raised the minimum from 500 to 1,000. That is pretty significant. And when we look at the impact that this would have just on last year, 30,000 more students would get TAP if they apply, right? Because, it's kind of hard to fathom, but this is what we're leaving on the table when students are not completing their TAP application or FAFSA. So this sets us up for future that we need to be able to make sure that all students are taking advantage of part-time TAP, workforce TAP, TAP in general. And then I guess I just want to be able to talk about the future initiatives. We cannot get away from the fact that there is a mandate to be able to complete FAFSAs in the high schools in order for them to graduate. That we still need to look at integrating loans into the award letters because that's been an effective strategy. Finances is a big barrier for families of launching a literacy program and then adopting AI so that this is as frictionless as possible, even with the new regulations. In this summer, we'll be launching and unveiling a strategic plan just for financial aid for the next 3 to 5 years to focus in on all of the things that you're seeing here and all of the recommendations that we're getting from philanthropy, from students, from financial aid officers, and also the National Institute of Student Success, their recommendations as well. The last thing I want to be able to do is there were some questions that were asked last time about College Now, because we just recently passed an MOU that allowed us to go into parochial schools. So for last year, right?
Fall
in
2022,
Fall
yeah.
2022, we had 7,700 students that had some CUNY experience and went to a CUNY institution, right? So that's our baseline. And what we're going to do now is look at our partnerships in non-DOE schools and start to try to try to match that and then exceed that. We're in partnership now because that resolution passed. We hope to be able to start 2 Jewish high schools this fall, that quickly. So they're very anxious to partner, and we just need to be able to make sure that everything's airtight for the fall. And then the last thing is that someone talked about retention for our students fall to spring. And we could say that at the bachelor's level, it's higher than the associate's level. So at the system level for the bachelor's is 91%, and associates is 77.4. So I think the question is how well are these students doing in their first year? And so that's the data we want to report out, which is just scratching the surface of how they're doing moving forward. But I wanted to at least answer those questions from the last time.
Questions?
You said that you're doing FAFSA at libraries, public libraries. Is there a reason why, I mean, it makes sense, but if we want to bang for our buck, I suppose you need the internet.
Absolutely.
But these young people are at malls, right? They're at beaches. You drive past Roosevelt Field, thousands of people walking around trying to buy stuff at goofy places. Shouldn't we go where they are?
They are if they bring their tax returns
Yes.
to the beach with them or to the mall with them. I think that,
Because the parents need to get.
it's really the parents, the new students,
Correct.
the continuing students. They're gonna apply in July and August, and they're gonna run into really major roadblocks. They have no idea. So we're gonna have to look at whether or not we protect them from being canceled because they acted late. But the new students in general, where we're really getting them, and we've got a lot of support, is when we are at the high schools and their parents are with them. That's really the most effective way because they're there anyway.
And by protect them, you mean what?
From, well, normally if you don't have your financial aid in place, you will be canceled for non-payment. It's in the tuition and fee manuals. So if you don't act and it's not secured, then you're in danger of losing the classes that you registered for back in, April. So we have to make some decisions on that. I just hope that better data when it comes to next month and when I report out how many people have not applied, that number goes down lower.
You talked about establishing partnerships with a couple of schools in September. Just as far as the non-public schools, the diocese in Manhattan, which is, I guess, Manhattan and Bronx as well as in Brooklyn, those are, you could talk to central places and establish relationships also.
We have.
Okay.
We have. The only one that I haven't talked to is Queens. I've talked to Brooklyn, Staten Island, and Manhattan. And the ones that have the most interest are in Brooklyn. They're very anxious to partner.
But I think all those schools, all the high schools, regardless of dioceses, whether it be New York or Brooklyn, Queens, the high schools are independent. It's not.
Very independent.
They don't go. It doesn't go through the
Okay,
chancellor,
the central,
a central
right.
person.
Okay.
The elementary schools do.
Right.
High schools.
What I've done is call a meeting with all the principals in that region and just kind of talk it through.
Okay.
They have no consolidated database. It's all self-reported. It's all very disparate. So I kind of pull them together.
Kind of antiquated.
Yeah.
Okay.
I visited Hector's, and he was not here, his former high school, wonderful high school in Queens, Bishop Lachlan. Oh my goodness, they have programs there that are just incredible. And they're ideal students for CUNY. Anyway, just my observation.
Well,
Yeah,
always
that's
good.
the one area that I'm looking at as well.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Really good.
Thank you.
And we'll all keep our fingers crossed because this could be disastrous. I mean, as I said, back in June and July, we'll have question starts to become, if it doesn't improve dramatically, then what do we do? Which is, that's one of those, just let's all say a prayer, guys.
I have a question. Do you think that some of our problems, that I'm sure there are many issues, but I think some of our problems, the fact that there were so many problems on campuses, not only here, in colleges in general, that have dissuaded youngsters from wanting to apply to college? Or their parents being dissuaded from sending their children, their kids to colleges?
There is some of that going around, but when our students in particular, who don't have the social capital, who don't have the income, that see education as the only viable choice for social mobility, the numbers reflect that. I tend to be optimistic in this, and I think that students can have a right to be on either sides of an issue, but first and foremost, they need a college education. And so that's really what we're trying to focus on. We get a lot of calls and admissions saying, where do you stand on this? And our stance is your education. That's what we're into. Is that what you're into? Because we're here to help you. And so I know a lot of that's going around, but I can't.
So you do get those kind of inquiries?
Yes. Yes, we get those inquiries, and when they are, when they need to be reported up, they are, right? But the by and large, are my children going to be safe? And I say yes, right? Because you only see what you see on TV.
Right.
You don't see what happens on all the other 24 or 23 campuses.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. Thank you again. Let's move on to our next presentation. Our second presenter is University Associate Provost of Careers and Industry Partnerships, Lauren Anderson. She'll walk us through the key priorities of CUNY's career success strategy to enable students to launch and advance in fulfilling careers, what elements are required to achieve these goals, and what the campus framework ideally might look like.
Can I say one thing real quick? Just wanted to explain why it's here in enrollment, because we see enrollment as creating the value proposition, which is what we were just talking about. So that's why we brought it to this committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. It's good to see you again. For those of you who don't know me, I oversee an office that reports both to the Chancellor and the Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost that is tasked with two things: ensuring that more of our students can connect more quickly to careers of their choosing at sustaining market rate salaries, and also ensuring that the city's economy and the state's economy can grow inclusively thanks to the work that CUNY does to prepare our students to go out into the workforce. And this has been gaining a lot of momentum. Just last Monday, the Chancellor and the Mayor and 5 companies announced a $12 million commitment to be able to help campuses build their capacity to connect students to employers that are looking to hire. And I'm here today to talk through this initial thinking that's emerging around what a more cohesive framework across a student's experience might be for actually ensuring that more of our students are able to boost their professional success thanks to interventions that are meant to proactively help them along their way and serve all students, not just the ones that will raise their hands for these kinds of supports. And I will say that this is very much initial thinking. We're in the process of collecting feedback from folks and discussing this with our campus stakeholders, our industry stakeholders, et cetera. And even some of you around the table have given feedback that has not yet been incorporated since this deck was submitted previously a couple weeks ago. But excited to bring this to you and sort of walk you through what it is that we're hearing from campuses and stakeholders and where we might go from here. So step one is just to build on what Wendy was saying about the reason to think about this in the context of this group. So what we know from some recent studies across the US is that the number one key factor that predicts whether or not a student is going to say that their degree was worth it is how well their institution prepares them for life outside of college. This is from a recent Gallup survey that was conducted nationwide, And it does not say specifically for careers outside of college, this particular study, but there have been subsequent ones, Inside Higher Ed and others have done surveys that indicate that really how well a degree can help a student advance into the careers of their choosing is one of the major reasons that students choose particular degree paths and particular options. And we know this really key indicators from the data because in the Degree for Every Dream campaign, the enrollment campaign that we launched in the fall, the number one highest performing ad with the most click-throughs to applications for CUNY was this Turn Your Internship Full-Time ad. Students are attracted to and interested in programs that can help them actually launch the careers of their choosing. And it is worth saying that AI is making it easier to generate knowledge. Our faculty will always have the expertise and always be a core value to our degree programs. But in this age where students can find information, granted not necessarily always accurate information, but information at their fingertips, one of the really big values that a university can provide is how well they help students understand how to apply that information, how to scrutinize that information, how to put it into practice in real-world settings. So with that said, we also know that that's why students choose to focus on career success. Why should we at this table and why should we care at CUNY? And in thinking about this room in particular, we know that students who participate in work-based learning programs, in making connections to careers as part of their degree path, we see that they're 1.5 times to 3 times more likely to persist throughout their careers or throughout their academic careers into degrees or to attain degrees. We also see that employers really value that work-based learning experience before a student leaves and are more likely to view candidates more favorably if they have that experience before they leave their academic pathway. And in terms of why it matters in terms of actual results, we see that there's a 20% gap between students who have participated in paid work-based learning like internships and co-ops and those who didn't in terms of the offer rates that they have coming out of higher education. We know that at CUNY, our students who participate in internships are 3 times more likely to have a job offer upon graduation than students who don't. And we also know that those who participate in paid work-based learning opportunities have a higher wage premium, earn 30% more than their peers when they go out into the market. So these are nationally researched data. We have some evidence that corroborates that here at CUNY, and that's really one of the reasons that we should think about this.
You're quoting a number of numbers that are nationally driven. I assume that it's a shorter period of time, but we're tracking those things on a CUNY basis.
We are tracking that. And there are some programs and some majors that have been tracking it longer than others. Mm-hmm. So in our computer science programs, we have more data from about 5 years of doing this work versus in our current programs, which we've been tracking for about 3.
Mm-hmm. Lauren, does that track with industry or degree? You know, I would imagine, and Wendy, this kind of goes to a point you made at an earlier committee about, you know, the opportunities for faculty research. I would think that there are some sectors where the opportunities for internship are just sort of sector-driven versus other. Is it analyzed by sector? I guess I'm trying to figure out, is this confounded by, is it because folks who do internships are in industries where the pay is higher and they're more likely to be swiped up? Or is it truly that the internship, independent of industry, has an independent effect?
Yeah, that's a great question because certainly we see a lot of our big corporate partners are the ones that can offer internships at scale for any one company, and those tend to be in tech and business fields. However, we are seeing that not in the paid realm, but in the unpaid realm, it's actually our social services and human services students and our teachers who have to do
right. Those are requirements.
Yeah. And that's considered in this, but the real gains we see are in paid internships. We also have started doing a lot more work to understand the size of the business that is offering internships, and we do run a number of programs with small businesses to help them connect to employers. So it's a mix, but happy to give you sort of the readout of that data more specifically. So in terms of knowing the significance of this, what are we doing then to make sure that more of our students can access the professional opportunities that they want? First of all, we are making it a priority. These are the goals from CUNY Lifting New York that relate to the career success of our students. And we are working towards, by 2030, a world in which 80% of our applied associate students, 80% of our bachelor students are consistently employed a year after graduation. Those numbers are coming up from 63% and 68% today, respectively. And also ensuring that more of our students are connecting more quickly to employment. So 75% of those same students we're aiming at having offers upon graduation. Right now it's about 53% for AAS students and 64% for our bachelor students. So this is generally the outcome we have put a flag in the sand that we're aiming at. And we've also made some big, bold bets about the activities that are going to get us there. We have put a goal of tripling paid internship participation and increasing the number of employers who are coming to campuses to proactively create connections for students to jobs.
Are those goals benchmarked to sort of other universities, or those goals that we came up with independently?
So certainly other universities, there were factors that contributed to us setting these goals from national standards, but part of it too is the students we serve and what their aspirations are. And many of their aspirations are to be able to transition to careers when they leave our doors. Not all, certainly, and for some the path is longer and they want to go to advanced degrees in order to get to the career they want, and that's great. That's a fantastic outcome. But part of this too is attempting to meet the objective of our students and not just a national average.
Okay.
Please.
I understand what you're saying in terms of getting paid internships and internships with various other reasons why they won't get paid. How strong is our outreach to the major companies in New York City? Because, I mean, I would think that they would welcome CUNY students. There's a lot out there, a lot of major companies and small companies as well. Now, how do we reach them? How successful are we in reaching them? Is there a particular, within your group, is there someone that goes out specifically to different companies and tries to sell, so sorry to use that term, but sell the product, sell that we have, that CUNY is ready, willing, and able to provide the students who have ambition, ability, and so on and so on. And so, I mean, how big is the outreach? How's it done? Who does it?
And just to throw a question in with that, because obviously in one form or another, interaction with the Jobs Council is huge. How's that going?
Sure.
At one point it was so-so. How's that doing these days?
Sure. So you'll see under this 20% increase in number of employers on each campus, there's a question mark. It's because CUNY has historically not had a way across all of our campuses to measure employer engagement. We don't know what that number is in terms of, if you look at all of our campuses and Central, how many employers we're engaging on a regular basis. We've made some really big strides this past year to get our campuses onto one system for career management so that we can see and understand how many employers, which campus is engaging with how, and how many we're helping to build relationships with centrally. Central does have, we've just stood it up 14 months ago, an industry support unit now where any employer looking to work with CUNY, they can come to one front door, and that front door, which consists of a director and 4 specialists in different sectors who also have some generic abilities, can guide employers to campuses where students with that expertise lives. That particular network has seen, in partnership with the campus resources that they have, about 2,000 employers expressed interest so far in 14 months, which, to give you a sense, is about double what the state's virtual career services centers have seen in terms of employers engaging for the whole state.
You said they come to you. Are we being proactive in going after them? That's my question.
Certainly. So there are a couple of different ways that we do that. One is through partnerships with large intermediaries like the CEO Jobs Council, which the chair mentioned. And what I would say is that partnership...
And by the way, could you describe the Jobs Council, because I don't know.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm not familiar with it. Thank you.
Sure. So the CEO Jobs Council is an intermediary that consists of 32 of the city's largest employers, corporate employers. It was spearheaded by Jamie Dimon and the Chancellor, set up with the goal of employing 100,000 low-income New Yorkers, 25,000 of whom would come from CUNY by 2030. And it's a group of CEOs that have committed to orient their organizations towards hiring pipelines and building talent pipelines with CUNY. We work with them on many different things, and for some things we have very deep and strong relationships, for instance, in the realm of college apprenticeships, where we are embedding apprenticeships into our AAS degree paths that lead directly to jobs at these companies, and other areas where we're building out our work together. So for instance, they do a lot of training of our hybrid academic and career advisors, which we'll talk about in a second, and do more recruitment events at specific colleges for business and tech majors. So intermediate is one way. We do some proactive outreach. We'd love to do a lot more of it this coming year. It's on our goals for the year. But it's a mixed effort between Central and the campuses. It can't just be Central reaching out to employers. We really need a coordinated system whereby campuses are also building those connections, and building those connections at the discipline and department level in addition to the campus level, so that insight is coming directly to departments about what they're seeing in industry, the trends in the market, and other opportunities for students to be able to enter. So quickly, just to give you all some sense, because it's related to this, about sort of the strategies for reaching this.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, sure.
Just, do you know the number of students for the BA or the bachelor's degree that go to grad school of some kind or other?
We do have that information. I can get you a
It's
more
under
precise number.
20%.
In aggregate, I think it's around 23, 24, but I don't know that I have
So would that affect
The goal overall is that 100% of our students wind up in the destination that they want.
Right.
80% of whom are employed, and we do see today, we have many students who are employed full-time and also going to grad school.
But I guess maybe I'm not understanding the number. So it's 68% now, but should we add 20% that are going to graduate school or no?
There's an overlap where
Okay.
students are going to graduate school while they're employed and working full-time
I
too.
see.
So it's not as simple as adding
Okay.
the 23%, but we can get you that exact number. Sorry, John.
Piggybacking on an earlier question about variation across disciplines, are there any AAS degrees that currently have an 80% placement rate 1 year out? Or is that,
I have to get back to you on that. I have to, we would have to run the numbers we have two major data sets that help us understand the outcomes of our students. One is state data. It's called the wage record system. And it's any employer who employs an individual has to pay unemployment insurance or register the fact that they have these individuals who could one day be eligible for unemployment insurance. So they give all of the information to the state about what a person earns and what field they're in, et cetera. That information is about a year and a half delayed in terms of how we get it, and so sometimes there's a lag on how effective it is. So we put in place a survey at time of graduation that asks, are you employed? Where are you employed? Is this a new job? Is it related to your major? So I can get you that information.
And
I
the
can't
percent of
remember.
response? And the percent of response that
So
we get to those surveys?
Yeah, so we started this in fall of '22, I believe, and we went from 11% to 18% to, I think we're now at 28%, and we don't have this spring semester's numbers in yet. So we have an upward trajectory of students.
Also to remind or maybe inform you, we've completely revamped the AAS programs. I mean, this has been the subject of intense focus because of the poor outcomes in these, because they're intended specifically to lead to a position, and we weren't seeing the results that we wanted. So it's premature to actually know the impact of the significant changes, both because of the lag and because they haven't had time to graduate. So it really is a number that truly is in flux at the moment.
Mark, for the bachelor students, I think it really is right around 20% who are going on to, with 1 year after graduation, are pursuing further school. Of those, more than 2/3 are working and in school at the same time. And it's only about 1/3 who are just in school. We don't see them working. So it depends how we want to count those, exactly as you said.
So to give you a sense of how we're going to get there, the CUNY Lifting New York strategic plan, which took input from all across CUNY, laid out a couple of strategies. The point of this slide is just to give you a sense that if we talk to the directors of career services at all of our campuses who are traditionally responsible with this task of planning out strategies for helping students boost their professional success, many of them are reporting that they're not doing these strategies currently to the full extent they could be. Part of that's resources, but part of that too is when it comes to aligning academic pathways with specific careers, they don't have the authority. They don't They're not in the academic pathways. They report to many different types of offices, it's not consistent campus to campus, and they don't currently have the kinds of collaborations and relationships that they need in order to execute this with the academic side of the house. So that's interesting because at the same time, our career success fellows who are faculty across CUNY surveyed about 1,600 faculty members, and 94% said that they see it as part of their job to help students prepare for career success, which was great. 94% of our faculty members, as we know, are very invested in the professional success and the success of our students once they leave our doors. But 87% of them said that they need support, need training, need recognition, need guidance, need support in order to be able to integrate career connections into the classroom. So in this context, where we have a need for greater engagement across staff and also the academic enterprise, we have the opportunity to move from a world in which career and professional advancement is seen as a separate and optional goal, not the primary goal of an academic pathway, where career services and adult and continuing ed and workforce programs are seen as opt-in, not like an expected part of a student's pathway, to one in which the goal is graduation and professional advancement of the academic pathway, and the connection to careers starts before a student ever leaves our doors. They shouldn't be thinking about it a week before they graduate, where am I going to go next? But rather that starts early so that it's a smooth pathway for our students to be able to pursue the professions they are aiming at. So that's sort of the moment we have and the pivot that we can make. And I just want to run through sort of one other key concept, and then would be very interested to answer any questions you all have, which is this is going to take a lot of coordination across the administration of a campus in order to ensure that students have consistent touch points to be able to move in this direction. And where we have initially started to collect some feedback from folks, there appears to be a general framework that's emerging, which is we really need to be able to ensure that students can identify and explore careers aligned with their interests early, that they understand what it takes to successfully attain those careers, that they can acquire the skills, critical, professional, that they need to be successful in pursuing those careers, that they can demonstrate their proficiency in those skills through channels that employers value, namely paid internships and work-based experience, and that they can connect to the first role and promotion, because some of our students come back to school to advance in their careers, not to get their first job, through a seamless network and pathway that's proactive in helping them connect to where they want to go. And in order to do this, there really needs to be critical pillars across the entire academic path that help students make these connections. And this is sort of the initial framework that's emerging, are pillars that are explicit about the importance of career exposure and exploration, so how students identify careers even before they come to CUNY. So a lot of the work that Renee was talking about with NYCPS, how do we help students make decisions about their degree paths based on where they want to go with them and what they want to do after they leave school? And that's true of adult learners as well. Hybrid advising, many campuses across the nation starting in the 90s began to integrate academic and career advising together. We have not done that at CUNY. We have some examples of hybrid academic and career advisors, and where we have deployed those kinds of advisors, we see that students graduate faster and have better job outcomes as a result. So how do we scale that kind of work across CUNY? Career-connected learning, our faculty actually are at the forefront of building community around how do we integrate career connections into the classroom. This is the Career Success Fellows, which is now over 100 faculty across CUNY. That's leading the charge in a lot of this work. Paid work-based learning, which we talk about a lot in terms of paid internships, and employer engagement. How do we build those employer connections into everything we do, into the structure of a campus, into our central engagement of employers externally? So these are sort of the key pillars that are emerging, and underneath them are activities, many of which are already happening at CUNY in different ways. But no one campus is fully deploying all of these pillars currently. And that's a challenge. Again, I know there's a lot of details here. I know you have the slide, but I just want to make sure we sort of move through all of this. That's a challenge because we know from other national models, we're not the only ones trying to figure this out. There are a lot of schools across the nation that have done work in these different pillars. We know that it's most successful when these pillars happen together, not in isolation. There isn't like a one-size-fits-all path. You can't just pick hybrid advising and expect that students will have dramatically increased results.
Then how do we move that happens, that those pillars are implemented on each campus and in each school? I mean,
Yes, great question. So you'll see here that there are some key enablers that need to happen that we're hearing from our campuses and that we're seeing across the nation need to happen in order to deploy this. And just one quick note, there are campuses that are deploying multiple of these solutions across the country. Here's one example, University of Minnesota is a public institution that's doing this work quite broadly, but there are others. So in order to do that, we really need to focus on a couple of things because right now our campuses don't have everything they need to build and deploy these particular pillars. One of them is infrastructure. Is there the right infrastructure to be able to coordinate all of these things that cross admissions officers who are talking to students about what their career aspirations are in order to pick degrees, across our staff who are doing career counseling, across our faculty who are integrating into the, what is the campus infrastructure that's needed for that? What are the data systems and technology platforms that can help us reach all students? And sort of what are the resources, funding that we need to do this? And just to talk about one of them, which is infrastructure, right now, most of this is entrusted to career services. And they tend to be isolated, maybe under student affairs, maybe under the provost, in some cases under institutional advancement, all over the place across our campuses in terms of where it sits. And rarely is it co-located with alumni engagement, sometimes industry engagement is even separate, oftentimes advising is separate, it's usually not in the academic pathway. So how do we move towards a world in which there's more cohesion and coordination across the campus? 5 of our campuses have already adopted this model, which consolidates workforce and adult and continuing ed with career services. But what we're hearing from the field and what we're understanding might be helpful is actually like a center of gravity, ideally, for this kind of work, where there is one office that works under the provost on the president's cabinet that helps to coordinate this.
If we have an idea of what works, and we're getting feedback from our campuses on what they believe works, why wouldn't we look at a larger, comprehensive, say a 3-year phase-in with a, here's how much it costs, here's what we expect the outcomes to be, and start to market that with both state, city, and possibly with private dollars also. So if we know, why wouldn't we, at the very least, say to our presidents, this is the 3-year cycle, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to roll this out, and at the end of 3 years, and here's how much it's going to cost, and we can start to, I'm not going to say beg, but we can start to solicit and work on those dollars.
So the purpose of articulating this framework and making sure that it's something that stakeholders think is valid, that they see as being supportive, is so that we can do that, so that we can go and marshal the resources needed to do this work. Some of the elements under here are things like creating guided pathways and meta majors, which require faculty governance. So we can't obviously say, we're doing this tomorrow. It's going to be a collaborative process to see how a campus gets there together with faculty. There isn't necessarily a way to just say we're doing it, but you're exactly right. This is why we're articulating this framework, is so that we can move in this direction and support campuses in identifying what they already do and building out the other pillars that they haven't yet fully deployed.
Do we have one campus that's doing this successfully? This is somewhat building on the report from 2021 of integrating continuing ed more fully into the community college AAS model. I hear now we've just revamped the AAS model and it's performing at a 53% rate for this, which makes me believe, as a skeptic on the whole enterprise of shifting major components of the academic side of things around, that maybe this model doesn't work so well for CUNY students and we should try it on a smaller scale first. And I'm guessing LaGuardia is gonna be our template for this, because at some point, we're gonna have a very shiny new facility that's gonna attract lots of students to LaGuardia to do this, but at this point, I'd balk at a 3-year time frame. I'd wanna see some demonstrated small successes before advocating for a voice that's representing continuing ed at the cabinet level of the campuses, because I don't think that model fits all the CUNY campuses of the senior colleges. It may not fit all the community colleges. It would be nice to see it rolled out and piloted before we pitch it wider.
So, to answer two questions at once, yes, we wouldn't deploy something of this scale across the board without some evidence that it works and works in our context. And each of these pillars, maybe with the exception of like very robust orientation, even the meta major pillars have an example at CUNY of how it works, and we're seeing it work. No school does all of these together. No school has fully implemented all of these pillars in a united way. Across the country, no school has done all of these pillars. Like CUNY has the opportunity to actually set a model for the nation in this regard. But I totally hear you, and I totally agree. We wouldn't want to dive into these unless we had evidence. And so part of it, too, is how do we start in a way that allows us to get evidence and calibrate, and how do we drive it based on the folks who have already been doing some of this work on the ground. So like the career connected learning pillar, our faculty fellows are the ones who are going to be leading that charge in defining the playbook or supporting other faculty in doing it. That's not something that an administrator can do. So totally hear your point on piloting and how we might go about it, and there is some basis for it already.
Let me just say, though, that the career exploration, the pre-application and orientation should not be something that we shouldn't try because, well, we don't know if it's a proof of concept. Those are nationally done things that we can do right away. If we wait for the perfect solution, we're never going to be able to reach the goals that we set for in the strategic plan. But even the ones that I see, those first two, fall under areas within EVC's purview that we could start making and moving in that direction. And then there are, like the CUNY 2X, there are some places where we could uplift. And it's those particular colleges that do it well that you talk to the other campuses. And that's what Lauren is trying to do is we can't, it has to be adopted, and we look at those individuals that are doing it well, and then we lift them. But the pre-application students, for the quicker we know if they're undecided, the better off we could do to help them do the career exploration in high school to make them ready for when they apply. So the future ready work absolutely needs to continue, and it's like painting a moving train.
Yeah, and the evidence is actually really clear that students like ours benefit disproportionately from this type of, because they don't have the safety network of having parents who are in the same field or in relevant fields that can provide that type of advice or guidance. So, I mean, even in the pre-application and the orientation, if you can, there are systems now that you can go in, and instead of every student thinking that their healthcare career is nursing, because that's all they know, they can see the 20 other things connected to labor market data with different academic requirements from an AAS all the way up to a PhD. That allows them to then map it. And the evidence, I think you have to be really careful about connecting what's happening in an AAS context to what's happening in a BA context. The AAS in part is failing because students are not graduating with marketable skills in those programs, and that's what we're trying to fix, because candidly, they need to be looked at carefully to say, do they actually connect to a career that the student thinks that they're going to, or does that student think that that's a pathway to a BA? And what we found is there are some that 80 to 90% of the students are going into a transfer situation and losing all of those credits. So it's not apples to apples, but I will say the evidence, the data nationally is incredibly strong in this space. This is for a retention purpose, enormous, especially for students like ours.
I exactly wanted to dig into what the 54% employment rate, and I think the flip side is not unemployment, it's further education. And if that's the version of the statistic we're using, it's because so many of those students are going on to further education. So it's not that they're not finding jobs, it's that they started in a career path that was designed for a job, but they actually decided to pursue further education. And so the revamp of the EAS is to make it as clear as possible that those are meant to be terminal degrees. So I just wanted to clarify where we think the failure point is with those degree types.
I just want to, and I really like that, thinking of the BA separate from the, because at Hunter, and we have, so one thing, and also just not to, like, it seemed like an intrinsic problem with trying to do in the high schools, is that some disciplines aren't ever exposed in high school. So this, like, at Hunter, so one thing we had at Hunter for a long time, it was a course called Humanities 110, which called Map of Knowledge. But the idea was that students did not know what was available to them at the BA. They didn't know all the disciplines. They, like anthropology complains that if we didn't have the bucket that anthropology fit in, no one would be an anthropology major because they don't, and philosophy is probably in the same boat. But anyway, I was going to say, it does seem like there should, part of this should be educating for the BA students to what's available at the level of a BA that goes beyond high school. I mean, where maybe that's not true for AA people, I don't know, but you know, you have the idea of nursing and stuff. But I guess that's where I'm thinking of, don't drop sight of that, of exposing students to the breadth of disciplines available at the senior colleges, at the BA colleges.
That's actually the point of the meta majors, and why it's been so successful is to cycle through the possibilities that they don't have any idea even exist, to really see, hey, this is what gets me excited, or these are the skills that I'm really good at. And it isn't just this narrow field that I've seen out in the field on TV.
Right.
So that is quite effective.
Yeah, I mean, we do have community, not to brag about Hunter here, but we do have the learning, we've had the learning communities for a long, long time. We do have the problem that our career services is off to the, but yeah.
Hunter is actually one of the schools that's starting to migrate towards a more coordinated model with your new Dean of Academic Innovation and Outcomes, I think, is playing a big coordination role. So, but your point is absolutely well taken, and exploration and exposure to a lot of different options.
I mean, so when I was a philosophy department chair and we had to do a self-study and wondered who our majors were, like 75% of our majors wanted to be science. They declared themselves in the sciences. You know, so, and then they became philosophy. I mean, that was true for myself. So I don't want, I mean, this is going to be just to represent the faculty view here, is that college is a time of discovering oneself, and you don't want to shut it down, the natural thing of being exposed to higher ed.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly the point, is how do we be deliberate about that exposure?
Right.
Because exposure is something our students deserve, should be able to explore, et cetera. But early, because if their exposure and exploration comes senior year and they decide at that point that they want to do something different, they've spent down all their financial aid, they can't go back and start again. And for our students, it's really important to have a deliberate approach to that as early as possible, but not limit it. Just make sure that it's happening early, deliberately. Yeah. Actually, that is sort of the main pieces that I wanted to talk through, other than to say, you know, it is interesting to look at some of the other models across the country in these pillars and what results they're seeing. Many of the results that have to do with integrating career success, as Wendy was saying, do have direct results on retention in particular and persistence in particular and four-year graduation rates. So I will leave this with you all, and you can look at it more at your leisure, but we're going to be collecting more input and working more towards engaging campuses and thinking through where they are at currently and where we might go.
I'll just add, I think what I really like about this is a close partnership with the faculty. The faculty fellows have been instrumental in helping identify the approach, the messaging, because we know it's a culture change, right? Mm-hmm. And from the perspective that we've been working on, it is opening the door. But if you talk about it as career focus, it sounds like you're closing the door, right? And so we have to be careful and make sure that we're on the same page. But I can tell you, Laura, it's really exciting to see the faculty enthusiasm and the thoughtfulness of how do we take what faculty are best at and add in that additional piece without losing any of exactly what you said, the intellectual development and the exploration that is what we're so proud of.
Can I just say one other thing about a resource? So I looked at University of Minnesota because they have a really great philosophy program at the graduate level and undergrad. And one thing, I looked at their website and I could tell that they had help with that website. I mean, it seems, and this is a problem, Hunter, again, not to, we have as our websites are bad. But it does seem that if this project of preparing so students can look at and see it career-focused, faculty are going to need help to help writing the copy. I mean, I looked at what the philosophy department did, and I know the person who they have on the front and all this, and I think that there has to be a way that, if you're going to have faculty being the ones to write the ad copy on their websites for careers, it's going to crash and burn. If they can have people that will help them, and that will help. Boilerplate.
It is
because
not.
everybody
It is not
critical
siloed.
thinking,
Yeah,
writing,
it's
everybody
cross-collaborative.
agrees. Yeah.
No,
So-
we actually have funding for these different pieces, and 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
My overview, personal. Enrollment, outcomes, career, the bloodline of CUNY. I can't commend this group, Wendy, your team, on this outstanding report today. They always give an outstanding report. But I just think that I'm inspired because they're inspired. They're not just talking because it's a job. These people are talking because they have they love what they're doing and they really want to make a difference. And I commend them all for doing that. And I commend you for picking the right people.
Well, these folks were here before I showed
Oh,
up, so I can't
guess they
take
picked
credit,
you.
but I try and take credit for their brilliance as much as possible. I will say, you cannot underestimate or overstate how complex it is to take a system of this size, this magnitude, and the diversity of approaches in the 25 colleges, and think, how do we be value add? That's what we always are trying to do, not to supplant what is being done on the campuses, but to be able to help coordinate at a systemic level that is value add for them. Sort of what you were saying, to add the thought leadership in places where there's just not enough time, resources, or energy to do it and replicate it 25 times. So the amount of thought that you just heard is literally 2 years worth of conversations with these folks thinking, how do we do that? And it's fun and exciting to see it reach this point.
And just, as I said, you heard my opening, and I'm rarely that positive. Try, but I'm rarely that effusive in praise, because you gotta earn it. And this group does.
Absolutely.
And the one thing I will say, I have watched the evolution. And for all of you, let me just say how impressive it's been, what a good team it is. I will agree with you and say that our provost, it is part of her team, and they have worked well together and been better organized and better focused. So, Wendy, thank you. But to the team, really, job well done. Thanks a lot, all of you.
And the key is they have it here.
Well, it's what gives you hope. It's what gives me hope, and
No,
it
you're right, though.
makes me smile.
We're the true
That's-
believers.
Yes.
We are.
Great team.
Yeah, it keeps us going.
All right. Any other
Keeps
questions?
us going.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Okay, then, with no more items on the agenda, let me make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wow.
Second, we are adjourned. Thank you. And thank you all again.
Thank you.